and welcome back to Map the Maze. So it's the Christmas month, or at least for those of you who don't celebrate Christmas, it's the end of 2021. So I thought I would do something more fun, something to really celebrate the fact that we've got to the end of 2021. Fingers crossed, 2022 is better for everyone. So this month, I'm going to be looking at mediation in the movies, although it's a little exaggeration because I've also had to look at mediation in TV because there's not a lot of mediation in the movies. The first movie that we're going to look at is The Wedding Crashers. If you haven't seen it and you have a high tolerance for gags and gross out humor, I guess, then it's a good laugh. I would say there's a lot of adult humor, so it's not one that is appropriate for children. And definitely the mediation that they conduct is not appropriate for children. So at the very beginning of the movie, Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn's characters are family mediators, or as I think they might be called in America, maybe more appropriately, divorce mediators. And they work together. So they co-mediate, where they're both in the same mediation, working together as a team to help the parties resolve their disputes. I have to say, so far, so mediation, that definitely all tracks, that you can have co-mediators where you work with two mediators who are working as a team. And so it requires a really high level of coordination, a high level of trust between the mediators, and also very aligned values around how the mediation should work. So for Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson, although I'm not sure that they're actually have values, they are very aligned, that's for sure. So the mediation that they're conducting is between a husband and wife who both have their solicitors present, their attorneys present in the US. And again, that is something that is relatively normal, that we sit across a table, that the parties sit across a table, sometimes for the first time, and try and find ways to discuss the issues that need to be resolved. In this case, they've brought their lawyers with them. That is a normal part from my perspective of the process, although it's not, I would say, typical for every session. So not every person wants to bring their lawyer. It can get pretty expensive, and they're not always the best place to help to come up with information or answers or to think about options. So often when I'm working with parties who do want to bring their solicitors to the session, the children's arrangements, if there are children, is something that we typically will do just with the parties. But then when we're doing maybe the financial negotiation, they may bring their solicitors then. And definitely, I think it can be really helpful. And most of the solicitors I work with are really constructive, that they want to help their clients to find resolution, to help their clients achieve the goals that they've set out at the beginning of the mediation. So that, for me, that all tracks. There's some other things that they do that I think are completely appropriate. So there's definitely an attempt to help the parties to future focus, to say, yes, things have happened. There are choices and decisions that are being made by both of you that, you know, the other person maybe doesn't agree with, but what does the future look like? How do we make the future better? In that, I think, again, completely appropriate. They speak to both parties. They try and hear what both parties are saying. So again, all so far so normal. And then I think things diverge. That in fact, some of the things that they do, as you will see if you watch, and I put a link to the clip below, are really inappropriate. Really, really inappropriate. So the obvious one, I think, would be just the fact that when they're trying to future focus the parties, as you'll see, which is great, and something that we definitely do in mediation, try and help people to think about what happens when the conflict is over. What would life look like if this was behind you? They kind of go down a relatively inappropriate tangent, looking at what would their new relationships look like in a very adult way. So I think not something that a family mediator would typically do, certainly not something that you would ever do in training, that you would be teaching people to do in training. So that not so much. The other thing I think they do that's really way off base is it's not unusual that when we're in mediation, there's maybe an asset or there's a benefit, and both parties kind of feel they should each receive it, maybe the whole thing. So the example that they have here is one that, again, is not unusual, although maybe will become increasingly unusual as we travel less, but air miles. So air miles are often something that people are like, well, I should have them. And the other person's like, no, I should have the air miles. And they actually suggest, well, just give the air miles to us. So that is something that is completely inappropriate. So a mediator will never say, let's resolve this difference by giving me the benefit or the asset. But obviously, this is a movie. They're not real mediators. But that definitely is something that for me was a red flag. That's not mediation practice. There's lots of other comments, I guess, that are a little bit editorial, which again, I think family mediators tend to stay away from because it's not our place to be making editorial comments or judgments, but they do get a resolution. So that is nice. And there's a really nice moment when, having been, I guess, sort of reframed by the mediators, the husband acknowledges the wife and says, well, can you get her a glass of water? Which, given where they were a few moments ago, is interesting. So I guess what I would say is not a typical mediation. And if your mediator is doing any of these things, maybe just have a quick word with them, particularly if they're trying to get you to give them assets. Not right. But it's an entertaining look. And in terms of the tension and the fact that people do get to express negative emotions across the table to each other, directly to each other, that for me, that all rings true. I'm not sure I agree with their tactics, but you can tell that their hearts are in the right places. So if you need a little bit of a laugh around family mediation and you're looking for something, the first 5 minutes of Wedding Crashers is a good place to start. After that, the film is really just about the wedding and the crashing. So the mediation aspect kind of goes away, and they certainly don't seem to use any of their mediation skills, any of them, when they're actually at the wedding, which is interesting. But for a laugh, for a few minutes of entertainment, definitely worth checking out. If you're thinking and you're going to mediation in the near future and you haven't been, please don't think this is what it's like. It's really not. Apart from the fact that you might be sitting across a table, but the rest of it, grain of salt. So if you're looking for something fun, check it out. And I will be back next week with another mediation movie clip. So take care and see you next week.